The silent echoes of Blackthorn Manor. The curse of Blackthorn. High atop a hill in the remote countryside stood Blackthorn Manor, a sprawling estate built in the late 1800s by the enigmatic and reclusive Sir Edmund Blackthorn. The manor was a marvel of Gothic architecture, with towering spires, intricate stone carvings, and vast, labyrinthine halls. But beneath its grandeur lay a dark history, one of tragedy, madness, and death. Local legends spoke of a curse that plagued the Blackthorn family, claiming the lives of anyone who dared to reside within its walls. In the early 1900s, the manor was abandoned after a series of inexplicable and gruesome deaths. Since then, it had stood empty, a crumbling monument to the horrors of the past. For decades, Blackthorn Manor was left to rot, its once magnificent halls now silent and forgotten. But the curse of Blackthorn had not been forgotten by all. Chapter 1: The Uninvited Guests. In the summer of 2023, a group of urban explorers, Emily, Jack, Rachel, and Peter, decided to spend a weekend at Blackthorn Manor. They were drawn by the allure of its haunted reputation and the promise of adventure. The group arrived at the manor on a stormy Friday evening, the sky dark and ominous, with thunder rumbling in the distance. The manor loomed before them, its windows dark and lifeless, its walls covered in ivy and decay. As they approached the massive oak doors, a sense of foreboding washed over them. Jack, the group's leader, pushed the doors open with a creak that echoed through the empty halls. They stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, revealing dust-covered furniture and peeling wallpaper. "We're really doing this," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and fear. "Let's set up our gear and start exploring," Jack said, trying to sound confident. They set up their base camp in the grand foyer, laying out sleeping bags and unpacking their equipment. As night fell, the wind howled outside, and the manor seemed to come alive with strange noises, creaks, whispers, and distant footsteps. Chapter 2: The Haunted Past. Emily, a history enthusiast, had spent weeks researching the history of Blackthorn Manor. She knew about Sir Edmund Blackthorn and the mysterious deaths that had plagued his family. She also knew about the last residents, a young couple named Jonathan and Elizabeth Hawthorne, who had disappeared without a trace in 1923. The group decided to split up and explore different parts of the manor. Emily and Jack took the upper floors, while Rachel and Peter explored the ground floor and basement. As Emily and Jack climbed the grand staircase, they felt the temperature drop. The air grew colder and heavier, and an oppressive silence filled the halls. They entered what appeared to be a library, filled with dusty books and old furniture. Emily's flashlight flickered as she scanned the room, and she noticed a large, ornate mirror on the wall. "Look at this," she said, approaching the mirror. "It's beautiful." Jack joined her, but his attention was drawn to a large painting above the fireplace. It depicted Sir Edmund Blackthorn and his family, their faces stern and cold. "There's something off about this place," Jack muttered. "It's like the walls are watching us." Meanwhile, Rachel and Peter had found their way to the kitchen, which was in a state of disrepair. Pots and pans were scattered across the floor, and the air was thick with the smell of mold and decay. As they searched the room, they heard a faint whispering sound. "Did you hear that?" Rachel asked, her voice barely audible. Peter nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, it's coming from the basement." They found a narrow door leading to the basement and descended the creaky wooden stairs. The basement was dark and damp, with the sound of dripping water echoing through the space. As they explored, they found a series of old, rusted chains attached to the walls and floors. "This is creepy," Rachel said, shivering. "What do you think they were used for?" Peter shook his head. "I don't know, but I have a bad feeling about this." Chapter 3: The First Encounter. As the night wore on, the group reconvened in the grand foyer to share their findings. Emily showed them an old diary she had found in the library, belonging to Elizabeth Hawthorne. The entries were filled with accounts of strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, unexplained noises, and sightings of ghostly apparitions. "We need to be careful," Emily warned. "There's something in this house, something malevolent." Just as she finished speaking, the front doors slammed shut with a thunderous bang. The group jumped, their flashlights swinging wildly in the darkness. A chilling laughter echoed through the halls, and the temperature dropped even further. "What the hell was that?" Jack exclaimed, his voice shaking. "I don't know, but we need to stick together," Emily said. "Let's get out of here." They hurried to the front doors, but no matter how hard they pushed, they wouldn't budge. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. "We need to find another way out," Peter said, his voice filled with desperation. They decided to head to the back of the manor, hoping to find an exit. As they made their way through the darkened halls, they heard footsteps behind them, growing louder and more insistent. They turned, but there was no one there. "This place is haunted," Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We need to get out of here." Chapter 4: The Shadows of the Past. The group stumbled upon a hidden passage behind a large tapestry in the dining room. It led to a narrow, winding staircase that descended deep into the bowels of the manor. With no other options, they cautiously made their way down. The staircase ended in a dimly lit corridor lined with old portraits. The faces in the paintings seemed to follow them as they walked past, their eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and anger. At the end of the corridor was a heavy wooden door. Jack pushed it open, revealing a large, circular chamber. In the center of the chamber stood an ancient altar, covered in strange symbols and dried blood. Chains hung from the walls, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. The group felt an overwhelming sense of dread as they stepped inside. "This must be where the rituals took place," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "This is the heart of the curse." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them, trapping them in the chamber. The room grew darker, and they heard a low, guttural growl. Shadows moved along the walls, coalescing into the form of a tall, hooded figure. "Who dares disturb the sanctity of Blackthorn Manor?" the figure intoned, its voice echoing through the chamber. "We mean no harm," Jack said, his voice shaking. "We just want to leave." The figure laughed, a sound that sent chills down their spines. "There is no escape. You are bound by the curse, just as those before you." Chapter 5: The Curse Unleashed. The figure raised its hand, and the room was filled with a blinding light. When the light faded, the group found themselves in a different time. The manor was no longer in ruins, but in its prime. They were standing in the same chamber, but it was now filled with people, all wearing dark robes. They watched in horror as the robed figures performed a dark ritual, chanting in an unknown language. Sir Edmund Blackthorn stood at the altar, his eyes glowing with a sinister light. He raised a ceremonial dagger and brought it down on a bound and gagged victim. The group felt a surge of nausea as the victim's blood flowed across the altar, the air thick with the stench of death. The robed figures chanted louder, and the room filled with an otherworldly light. "We need to stop this," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to break the curse." "But how?" Rachel asked, tears streaming down her face. Emily pointed to the altar. "We need to destroy that altar. It's the source of the curse." They moved towards the altar, but the robed figures turned towards them, their eyes filled with malice. The hooded figure from before appeared before them, blocking their path. "You cannot interfere," it said, its voice like a thousand whispers. "You are bound to the curse." Jack stepped forward, his face set with determination. "We won't let you keep us here. We will break this curse." He grabbed a heavy candlestick from a nearby table and swung it at the altar. The robed figures screamed as the altar cracked and crumbled. The hooded figure shrieked in rage, its form dissolving into shadows. Chapter 6: The Final Battle. The manor shook violently as the curse began to unravel. The walls cracked, and the floor buckled beneath their feet. The group fought their way through the collapsing chamber, desperate to escape. They found themselves back in the grand foyer, but it was now a scene of chaos. Ghostly apparitions swirled around them, their faces twisted in agony. The air was filled with the sounds of screams and cries for help. "We need to get out of here," Peter shouted over the noise. They ran towards the front doors, but the hooded figure appeared before them once more, its eyes burning with fury. "You cannot escape," it roared. "You are mine." Emily stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "We will break this curse. We will set you free." She raised the diary she had found in the library, reciting the final entry aloud. As she spoke, the air around them crackled with energy, and the hooded figure writhed in pain. "You cannot defeat me," it screamed. "I am eternal." Emily continued to recite the words, her voice growing stronger. The diary glowed with a blinding light, and the figure dissolved into shadows, its screams echoing through the halls. The manor shook one final time, and the front doors burst open. The group stumbled outside, the fresh air filling their lungs. Behind them, Blackthorn Manor collapsed in on itself, reduced to rubble. The aftermath. The group stood on the hill, watching as the sun rose over the horizon. The manor was gone, and with it, the curse that had plagued it for centuries. "We did it," Jack said, his voice filled with relief. "We broke the curse." Emily nodded, tears of relief streaming down her face. "We set them free." The group returned to their lives, forever changed by their ordeal. They vowed never to speak of what had happened, but the memories of Blackthorn Manor would haunt them forever. The hill where the manor once stood became a place of quiet reflection, a reminder of the darkness that had been vanquished. And though the manor was gone, the legend of Blackthorn would live on, a chilling tale of horror and redemption.
Don't forget to subscribe.